Every culture in human history, separated by oceans, mountains, and thousands of years with zero contact with each other, invented the exact same monster. A creature that lives in the dark, that hunts at the edge of the firelight, that waits for you to wander too far from home. That's not a coincidence. That's a survival manual, and you've been running on it your entire life without ever realizing it. You're lying on the dirt floor of a cave. It's 40,000 BC. The fire's burned down to embers. No nightlight. No deadbolt. No white noise machine drowning out the world. Just you, the cold, and a tree line you can't see into. A branch snaps. Somewhere out there. Your heart slams against your ribs before your mind even catches up. And here's the part that should unsettle you a little. Your brain doesn't just register a sound. It paints a picture. Teeth. Eyes. Something waiting just past the light. By morning, you're going to sit your tribe down around those same embers and tell them exactly what it looked like. This is the origin of horror. Not Stephen King. Not the campfire stories you told to scare your friends at summer camp. We're talking about the first time a human being deliberately built a terrifying story to frighten another human being on purpose. And that single reflex might be the reason your bloodline didn't end 40,000 years ago. Because here's what nobody tells you. We didn't start telling scary stories because we enjoy being scared. We started because the monsters in our heads were a survival tool so effective that the people who didn't have them simply didn't survive long enough to have kids. For most of human history, we were not the apex predator. We were lunch. Dig through the fossil record and you'll find hominid skulls with the exact spacing of a saber-toothed cat's bite punched clean through the bone. In the dark, we had no claws, no night vision, no fangs. We had exactly one advantage over everything trying to kill us: imagination. Once the human brain developed a neocortex capable of running simulations, everything changed. That woman in the cave didn't just see a bush move. She could picture what was inside it before she got close enough to find out the hard way. Anthropologists call this threat simulation, and the math behind it is brutal. Assume every shadow is dangerous, and 99% of the time you're wrong and mildly embarrassed. Assume it's nothing, and the 1% of the time you're wrong, you're dead. Evolution didn't reward the calm. It rewarded the paranoid. Every person watching this is descended from someone who flinched first and asked questions later. But a private nightmare doesn't protect a tribe. So humans did something almost no other species fully figured out. We exported the fear. Imagine that same woman finds a riverbank 3 miles off. Water's clean. Grass is flattened by something big, something recent. She has 2 options. Let her children wander over and find out for themselves. Or sit everyone down by the fire and build them a monster. Glowing eyes. A taste for wanderers. A reason to never go near that water alone. She isn't entertaining anyone. She's installing a warning directly into their nervous system. The kind that doesn't fade the way a spoken rule does, because fear sticks. The first horror stories weren't bedtime fun. They were safety manuals wearing a monster costume, copied mouth to ear for 1,000 generations, because the families who told them lost fewer children to the dark than the families who didn't. Now here's where it gets stranger. This wasn't just stories. Some researchers believe a huge chunk of monster mythology actually came from the human body itself, specifically from something that happens to roughly 8% of people at least once in their lives: sleep paralysis. It's a real, documented neurological event where your brain wakes up before your body does. You're fully conscious. You can see the room. And you cannot move a single muscle, because the part of your brain that paralyzes you during dreaming hasn't switched off yet. And in that frozen, helpless state, a huge percentage of people report the exact same sensation: a crushing weight on the chest, and the unmistakable feeling that something is in the room with them, sitting on top of them, watching. Sound familiar? It should, because cultures with zero contact with each other gave that exact sensation a name and a face. In medieval Europe, it was the Night Hag, an old woman who sat on your chest while you slept. In Scandinavia, it was the Mare, which is genuinely where the word nightmare comes from. In West African and Caribbean tradition, it's the old hag who rides your back while you sleep. In Newfoundland, fishermen called it the exact same thing. In parts of East Asia, it's described as a ghost pressing down on the body. Different continents, different centuries, different religions entirely, and they all independently described the same paralysis, the same chest pressure, the same presence in the dark, and gave it the same job. A monster wasn't always a campfire invention. Sometimes it was the only available explanation for a terrifying biological glitch nobody had the neuroscience to understand yet, so the brain filled in the rest with the same threat simulation engine it's been running for 300,000 years. You can watch the bigger pattern fossilize the moment writing itself is invented, in places that had no possible contact with each other. The Epic of Gilgamesh, carved into clay over 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, gives us Humbaba, a forest guardian whose breath is plague and whose roar floods the land. Why a forest monster specifically? Because to a Mesopotamian, the city wall was the edge of reality. Past it was chaos with teeth. Now go to Slavic folklore, completely unconnected, and you find Leshy, a forest spirit who leads travelers off the path and deeper into the trees, never to return. Go to Japan, also unconnected, and you find yokai haunting specific rivers, specific crossroads, specific stretches of forest road at night, each one tied to a real physical hazard, a flood-prone river, a landslide road, a cliff edge. Go to West Africa, and you find spirits guarding sacred groves that, when modern researchers actually surveyed them, turned out to overlap almost perfectly with the last unlogged old-growth forest in the entire region. The myth wasn't decoration. It was conservation enforced by fear, centuries before anyone had the word conservation. Different continents, different languages, different millennia, the exact same engineering. A monster placed precisely at the location that was actually going to kill you, or precisely at the resource that needed protecting, dressed up as folklore so nobody had to repeat the warning twice. That's not myth. That's risk management with significantly better marketing. And it didn't stop at forests and rivers. When disease entered the picture, the monsters evolved with it. The vampire myth, as we know it, exploded across Eastern Europe in the 1700s, and historians now believe it tracks almost exactly onto outbreaks of tuberculosis and rabies moving through small villages. Tuberculosis causes pale skin, bloodshot eyes, and a slow wasting that made the sick look like they were being drained of life by something. Rabies causes an aversion to bright light, an aversion to mirrors due to disorientation, and in some cases a literal urge to bite. Villagers with no concept of germ theory did the only thing humans have ever done with an invisible threat. They built a visible monster to explain it, then they staked the bodies of the recently dead to stop the infection from spreading to the rest of the village. The vampire wasn't fantasy. It was a folk autopsy of a disease nobody could see. Zombies follow the same blueprint from a completely different direction. The modern zombie, the shuffling, infected, can't stop it from spreading version, didn't really exist in fiction until 1968 with Night of the Living Dead. Why then? Because that's roughly when Cold War audiences were absorbing decades of pandemic anxiety, nuclear contamination fears, and the growing understanding of how an outbreak actually spreads person to person. The monster always mutates to match the era's real fear. Forest predator when we lived in forests. Disease when disease was the invisible killer. Contagion and contamination once we understood what contagion and contamination actually were. Then, in the span of about 200 years, we ruined the dark on purpose. Streetlights, deadbolts, concrete walls. We hunted the predators that used to hunt us to extinction or behind zoo glass. We mapped germs, named viruses, and built vaccines for the things that used to wear a monster's face. For the first time in roughly 300,000 years of human existence, there is functionally nothing left in the dark that wants to eat you, and almost nothing invisible we can't eventually name and treat. So naturally, we pay money to sit in a pitch-black room and watch a man in a hockey mask chase a teenager through the woods. We deliberately trigger the exact same adrenaline spike our ancestors felt when something was actually scratching at the cave entrance, except now there's a popcorn bucket involved. And the only thing actually at risk is your ability to fall asleep with the lights off afterward. A Paleolithic mother told a monster story to keep her child alive past sundown. A movie studio tells one to keep you in your seat for 2 hours and sell you a sequel, then a video game, then a theme park ride. Same neurochemistry, same ancient circuitry, lighting up for completely different stakes, and somehow we still buy the ticket every single time. So why does every culture on Earth, separated by oceans and centuries, keep inventing the same monster? Because the monster was never really about the forest or the river or the disease or the dark itself. It was about a parent who couldn't bear to lose you and didn't have a word strong enough to stop you on its own, so they built one out of teeth instead. It was about a village that didn't have a microscope, so they built a coffin and a wooden stake instead. It was about a brain that woke up paralyzed in the dark and needed a name for the weight on its chest. So it built a hag, a mare, a ghost, sitting right there in the room. Next time a floorboard creaks somewhere in your house at 2 in the morning and your stomach drops before your brain even catches up, that's not irrational. That's 300,000 years of ancestors who flinched first, who told the story anyway, who passed the fear down the line on purpose, still running quietly in the background of your skull, still trying, even now, to keep you alive.